Kill a man and you're a murderer. Kill millions of men and you are a conqueror. Kill everyone and you are a god. Jean Rostered, 1955. Ez Talk. Defining Tyrant. Betty Gland, 2002, who explored the paradoxical behavior of tyrants defined. Tyrant, in simple words, is one who seeks and uses power for his own rather than the general interest, does it outside the law, and creates a political order based on extreme cruelties and mistrust. Tyrant is an individual with narcissistic personality disorder with severe superego deficiencies that may have some advantages in rising to power. But once he has consolidated his position, his reality-testing capacities diminish. Fantasies held in check, when his power is limited, are apt to become his guides to act. As a consequence, his behavior becomes more erratic, and his paranoid defense becomes more exaggerated. The National Medical Series for Independent Study, 2nd edition Psychiatry, 1990, describes individuals with narcissistic personality disorder have a grandiose sense of their own importance. They have little ability to empathize with others and appear to be more concerned with appearance than substance. Individuals are likely to idealize overall as well as devalue others. Narcissistic individuals tend to exude a sense of entitlement and expect to be acknowledged as special. There can be no better example of a tyrant than Abiy Ahmed Ali, the contemporary gang leader with personal traits that fulfill the checklists. A self-certified assimilated criminal gang, a disgrace that he was enabled to climb up to the political saddle and sat tall in April 2018 from nowhere. He hijacked the revolution of the great Oromo nation that toppled his fascistic masters that he loyally served for over 3 decades solid. Furthermore, Gland offered the checklist of tyrants, personality disorders, by citing Plato's work The Republic and his student Aristotle's work Politics. A tyrant is defined as one who 1. Rules without law, 2. Looks to his own advantage rather than of his subject, and 3. Uses extreme and cruel tactics. As Aristotle noted, the tyrant is one who cuts off the heads of those who are too high, undertakes measures to sow discord among subjects, impoverishes people with his exploits, and uses informers and betrayers to undermine among his subjects. Living in freedom is a natural right, not a gift once one is born on this planet. The tragedy of humanity is the worst crime against humanity that human beings have been destined to witness, at least for the last 3 millennia. The worst evil men-like creature that arose on this planet who executed the police of necropolitics. A work of death. The power to decide who must live or die out of the society was coined by Prof. 𝗔𝗵𝗺𝗀𝗆, 𝗣𝗵𝗶𝘆, a Cameroonian historian, philosopher, political scientist, and public intellectual and author of dozens of books that must be read to understand the nitty-gritty of the political quagmire in the world from an African perspective and reality. What has been committed under the mantra of the relentlessly spun term called civilization, but read barbarianism? The fact is that no human being invades, wipes out indigenous people, commits democide, or takes their land but calls it civilization. Unveiling the layers of Abiy Ahmed's political persona. Abiy, contorted from Abiot, alleged to be a child name, began to bear Kalashnikov as a child soldier at the age of 14. This was a time when Mengistu's military junta dictatorship, the father of Red Terror, was collapsing after a solid 17 years of Stalinist rule, more than Stalin himself. It was one of the bloodiest periods of one of the most backward-dependent settler colonial Abyssinian Empire, known by the stolen trade name Ethiopia. A time when 3 major liberation fronts of the region, the Oromo Liberation Front, OLF, the Tigrayan Liberation Front, TPLF, the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, EPLF, and the TPLF branded POWs as Ethiopia People's Democratic Fronts, EPRDF, triumphed and occupied Finfini. The heartland of Oromia. From child soldier to spy agent. EPRDF, a misnomer by itself, first has been neither Democrats nor representative of the alleged name, Ethiopia, but the opposite is the truth. It was the trade name branded by TPLF for POWs, i.e. the conglomerates of Mengistu soldiers, mostly kidnapped, press-ganged youth, Enrolled farmers enforced by quota system collected from every village in the entire South. The ill-trained militias were sent to the north to fight against TPLF and EPLF and turned to cannon fodder. The lucky ones who survived the war and unconditionally surrendered huge numbers of POWs branded to EPRDF for purpose. The TPLF adopted the same method deployed by 𝗙𝗪𝗻, renamed Menelik II during the war expedition, conducted against the disenfranchised 𝗤𝗹𝗵𝗀𝗋 after he died in 1889. 𝗙𝗪𝗻 was advised by Alfred Ilg, the master architect of Menelik's Empire, who escorted the expedition. Once the disenfranchised 𝗤𝗹𝗵𝗀𝗋 lost the war without significant resistance, 𝗙𝗪𝗻 proclaimed, "We are brothers, and I will not take revenge, kill or punish you for what 𝗤𝗹𝗻s did to me. Join me to invade the South, and I will promise you will a land and slave owners once our 𝗔𝗵𝗺𝗃, literally mean invasion and occupation, is accomplished." They joined him. Exactly after a century, the TPLF, the Johannisian, reversed the gear. They branded the POWs as EPRDF to serve as working horses in invading and occupying the South in the entire south of Tigray. A new terra for the TPLF rebels enclaved in the Tigray desert for 2 decades. One among the 89 PDOs was the nominal OPDO, Oromo People Democratic Organization, to whom Abiy Ahmed belongs. The TPLF invented them intentionally to be used against the strongest formidable OLF, with who they fought against the military junta triumphed, drafted, and signed what was called the Transitional Government's Charter, TGC, and officially adopted nominally the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. The OLF represents at least half of the population incarcerated within the empire, and older than the TPLF, represents the Tigrayan people who make up only 5 to 6% of the population incarcerated within the empire. The TPLF rebels surely knew right from the beginning as they invented and branded the POWs as EPRDF, to supplant the entire genuine liberation fronts of the people of the South to 𝗵𝗔𝗆 proper. If the TGC was implanted and practiced on the soil, and an election was held as stated, the strange TPLF Albanian version of Stalinists arrived from about 950 km far north, have zero chance to hold the power in Finfani, at the heart of Oromia, and other capital city of the great and ancient African nation of the Oromo people they knew. The TPLF that went to the Tigrayan desert to liberate Tigray, as the name is self-explanatory, made a U-turn from liberator of Tigray to a defender of a predatory settler colonial Abyssinian Empire, utter the mantra anomial called EPRDF under the command ruled by TPLF. The TGC, which turned out a dead-born child, as a period of transitional dictatorship to turn to a stable and finally a super dictatorship. Their leader Meles Zenawi turned to another tyranny, a one-man rule monster, an analogy to Mengistu. He planned a policy analogy to analog to Nazi Germany and executed it. Waged war against the Oromo people to be wiped out and reduced to half of their demographic dominance within this prison house as the prime targets. Oromia, the richest land, the bread bucket, carries almost over 60% of the burden of the empire on her shoulders to be sold to greedy states and foreign enterprises with a value of a sandwich price per hectare. He turned to another unscrupulous tyrant until his last breath. Painted the great liberation front of the Oromo people concerned as terrorists without slight shame. From spy agent to power hijacker, Abiy Ahmed, who came out of nowhere, followed the footsteps of the cruelest of all outlaws of 𝗵𝗿𝗄, or Abyssinian village chieftains, resurrecting butcherers in graveyards who catapulted to political power since her invention in the last square of the 19th century, and turned to the full-fledged predatory settler colonial empire. That is the reason the title of the article names him retro-fascist and shames him for heinous crimes he has been committing at least for the last 6 years. Abiy is nothing but an exceptional extension of his master, the TPLF regime's tyrannical rule he served, who committed the most heinous crimes proved with tones of recorded pieces of evidence available in all forms 3 decades. They committed a silenced genocide waiting for a time for justice to be brought to light. Persons may die or be reshuffled, yet the system exists, and such is the case of the settler colonial Abyssinian Empire from her birth to the very date with insignificant alterations of the system. The core problem of the downtrodden mass of the population incarcerated within this prison house. From Nobel Peace Laureate of sick world to global pariah and retro-fascist, Abiy Ahmed has been an assimilate loyal servant of TPLF, merely camouflaged with EPRDF for 28 years solid. On November 5, 2021, Eliza McIntosh, the senior producer at CNN Digital International, published an article titled, "From Nobel Laureate to Global Pariah: How the World Got Abiy Ahmed in Ethiopia So Wrong," by nomming and shamming the contemporary illegitimate and war criminal leader, and how much intelligent the Nobel Committee of Peace. I prefer to use the term retro-fascism rather than neo-fascism, which is synonymously used. Retro is a prefix of Latin origin that means backward and emphasizes the system, while neo is a prefix of Greek origin that emphasizes groups of persons who promote the fascist ideology. He is an exceptional assimilate, i.e. negative chauvinist, the worst devil from within next to Menelik II, the pitch-black genocider, in the graveyard, analog to Leopold II of Belgium-Congo. Menelik II and his successor have been his heroes, built status without the slightest shame, and preached to bring back the empire to where they left off. A devil, a born devil on whose nurture can never stick, on whom my pains, humanely taken, all lost, quite lost. And as with age, his body uglier grows, so his mind cankers. I will plague them all, even to roaring. Shakespeare, The Tempest Prospero, Act IV Scene I-26. Quoted by Anna Aragno in The Devil Within, a psychoanalytic perspective on evil. Abiy is the residual of the past, a one-man rule to whom power has meant a license to corrupt, maim, and mass murder indiscriminately. Mass incarceration, packing in prison concentration camps like sardine, torturing, rapping, executions, etc. turned their daily business throughout. He committed the most agonizingly, unforgettable, and irreconcilable crime against the great Oromo people. It has been the revolution of the great nation, Kiru's male and female Oromos. The revolutionaries, the custodians of a non-violent revolution that toppled the TPLF, merely camouflaged under the EPRDF tyrannical regime, armed to their teeth, who stood firm, arms crossed, against rolling tanks and loaded guns pointed at their foreheads. Those martyrs whose blood has been spilled, killed in thousands, and jailed in hundreds, nevertheless, brought the regime to its knees and led the portion of the TPLF core clan to flee to Mekelle in the summer of 2018, from where they came 28 years ago. Abiy's hands have been smeared with the blood of the revolutionaries of the Oromo people. He turned one of the most backward empires into a war zone, a crime scene, and a bloodbath. The dependent settler colonial Abyssinian Empire, 𝗔𝗵𝗆, into an open-air prison terra. The empire, where the mass downtrodden and helpless masses of the population that accounts for about 90 ethno-nationalities, with current population counts 130 million plus, have been incarcerated. He planned a policy to execute, to turn back the most backward and barbaric empires to the 19th century. Abiy has been proved to be an innate pathological lair of global reckoning, a devil who made a 360 degrees turn overnight and came out as an angel in the spring of 2018. The challenge question is not to find him lying, but when and where he did not, and that is what an advantage that individuals with narcissistic personality disorder exploit when the opportunity is given. He hijacked the custodian of a non-violent revolution of the great nation, Kiru's male and female, that toppled the fascistic regime. He turned the dream of the downtrodden masses of the population, incarcerated for centuries, hungry for freedom and liberation. This world is not this world. Abiy is an innate pathological liar able to sail, not at home alone, but via seas and oceans. They purchased his lies blindfolded, ear-deafened, and even came to the stage to award a Nobel Peace Prize. The first worst shame of all shame in the global arena, and the Nobel Peace Prize Committee and the reputation of the title of peace. One observes that people compare the mistakes of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee that awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to Aung San Suu Kyi of Myanmar in 1991 with Abiy Ahmed Ali in 2019. That is a grave mistake of the incomparable. San Suu Kyi was nearly 15 years in detention between 1989 to 2010 for the struggle to bring democracy, and she was awarded while she was still under house arrest. Abiy, in contrast, was a member of the TPLF, merely camouflaged with EPRDF. As a de facto spy agent of the regime, now the 𝗥 seems to forget that he was the calf of TPLF, a tyrannical regime of one-man rule, indiscriminate killing, massacres, packing the Oromos in prison, concentration camps like Sardin, torturing and rapping. Lists with no limits, looting and land grabbing turned their major and daily accomplishments. Rule of terror and horror, repression, targeted killing, blackmailing those who they free struggle for democracy. A basic human right they see as nemesis within the entire population incarcerated within the empire. What was called democracy meant to be a human right that a person has an inalienable right to elect, a voice heard. That is a suicide pill for the tyrants. Among them, those who struggled for democracy, a basic human right, the Oromos turned to their prime targets for obviously known reasons, as it has always been. They also targeted the people of the South who had similar, if not identical, historical faith within one of the most backward and barbaric empires on the planet since her invention and establishment. Robert J. Lifton, the author of The Nazi Doctor's Medical Killing and The Psychology of Genocide, said, "This world is not this world." Trusted a devil clad as angel. It is unfortunate and a disgrace that in the mess of the political quagmire of the dying empire, those who trusted a blasted liar of the global reckoned, a devil within who came to the market of politics as an angel. A fatal erratum to those who danced to Abiy's music and joined him allowed him to serve as a transitional caretaker to regret the most within months, turned his prey. Those publicists who batted an empty drum of verbatim with empty hands but big mouths, self-certified knowables. A tragedy was that they joined Abiy, the delusional assimilate, whose dream is bringing the backward empire to the worst in the 19th century when the empire was invented. As in Oromo's expression, Beeknan you of Bararani, knowledgeability is only if you save yourself late alone your nation. The dependent settler colonial Abyssinian Empire, 𝗙𝗵𝗺𝗆, was virtually invented, established, and maintained parallel to European colonizers in the Berlin Conference of 1884–85, the scramble for African resources, labor, and to avoid the pre-programmed clashes of interests and bloodbath on African soil. Henceforth, Abyssinia, the most backward empire on the planet, has been invented, established, and maintained as a mirror reputation of the greedy, resourceless European colonizers, the genocidaries, wherever their ship docked and feet held. Abiy's heroes, the cruelest of all 𝗥𝗲𝗄𝗆 the cruelest of all 𝗥𝗲𝗄𝗆 village shifats like 𝗙𝗏𝗄𝗄𝗆, Menelik, 𝗥𝗲𝗁𝗆, half a devil and half 𝗥𝗲𝗄𝗆s, the heroes of Abiy turned the best client backed by Europeans with all that they desperately needed. Modern firearms, finance, advisories, mercenaries, etc. can conquer the entire South. Oromia is the largest, richest, and the powerful nation that carried the poorest empire. It is the only one who controls Oromia, and the placenta land of the Oromo people Finfini controls the entire empire and exploits the rich south to Abyssinia proper. The only reason why all 𝗥𝗲𝗄𝗆 political elites, half a devil and half 𝗥𝗲𝗄𝗆s, and assimilates commit heinous crimes wherever their feet are held. They bite an empty drum on a 24/7 basis to maintain her status that established a viral mode of life since her invention. For the last 3 years, the world has been intensively engaged in singularity with two tyrannical regimes, once they began a genocidal war crime respectively, and continued the very date. A blasted liar of global reckoning, Abiy Ahmed clad with garb a fake named the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. He operates with the zealous name, Prosperity Party, surrounded by all sorts of stomach politicians, retro-fascists, betrayals, etc. He licensed to execute 𝗥𝗲𝗁𝗆 power and legitimacy to kill, Decide who to live or killed. The Credo of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, Resolution 217, was adopted by the UN General Assembly in Paris 3 years after the end of World War II on 10 December 1948. A milestone document in the history of human rights where the ethos of genocide never again was born. If it had not been turned into a dead-born child, the human tragedy genocides, ethnic cleansing, and war crimes the world has been destined to witness daily may have been not arrived to such an extent. The life of the most vulnerable part of society may at least be minimized. Traints have never been emboldened to commit crimes. The global pariah Colonel Abiy Ahmed, to borrow Eliza McIntosh's word, must have been arrested and handcuffed and brought to the right place to ICJ, The Hague in the Netherlands, in April 2018. He must have been sitting in the chair of Charles Taylor of Liberian, brought to the international courts for justice, and punished for the crimes committed for almost 3 decades. No, that was not done, but diametrically the opposite. Free, and continued his genocidal crime in 𝗷𝗶𝗄 daily. Where is the credo of UDHR? What do the collections of kleptocrats, the tyrants, nominal Democrats, etc. at 405 E 45th Cent, New York, USA do?